thank all of you for joining. So we'll be talking about miscommunication today, but we will also be talking about underappreciation. And what you'll find is that there is a lot of overlap between those two topics. But let's back up just a moment. The issue here is that we are seeing an explosion of use of big data, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and that growth is going to increase almost exponentially over the next 4 to 5 years. You might argue that in the last 6 months, this has changed a little, but there is a belief that it's an information economy now. It is not the resources that it used to be. It's about how you can use information, collect information, and apply information. We're seeing that almost 100% of large organizations, the executives are saying they are investing more in big data and AI, and that the field of data science is going to increase 25 to 30% over the next 5 years. The topic of big data gets everyone excited. They believe in this new approach that has a promise that as you apply technologies that can analyze and explore all of these new data sets, and that big data, because it's this new superior way of looking at things, will be able to derive some insights and identify patterns that will deliver value. And so that is the promise. But I have a question, and I've been curious about this, is how often does that promise actually get us to a successful business application? How many projects actually make it to that promised land? Well, I'm going to skip to the punchline. Not very many. According to industry experts who have been looking into this, as many as 85% of big data projects fail. One review said 87% of data science projects that they looked at never made it into production with any real value. And only 20% of analytic insights, according to Gartner, who advises executives, are going to deliver value through the end of this year. So that's 1 in 5 that will actually make it into production. So I want to start with a poll so that I understand who's on the call. And if you would let me know whether you have a business-focused role, an analytic-focused role, or evenly split between the two. If you wouldn't mind letting me know. Okay, it's about 50-50 business, so 33% in each category. Oh, a little more analytic focused. Great. All right. So then a second question is, if you thought about the analytic projects that you either request as a business leader or that you are involved in, what percentage of those projects actually get taken seriously and implemented to change something about the business? And your options are fewer than 20%, 20 to 40, 40 to 60, and more than 60. I'll give you a few seconds to answer. Okay, a couple more. All right. So we're seeing that most of you believe that it's about half the time. And some of you think of it as less than 1 in 5. So we are split, but we're doing a little bit better than the experts are reporting. So let's think about why projects don't succeed. And according to MIT and Harvard Business Review, a lot of the reasons why projects don't work out is what they say is at the interface between the science, the data science function, and the business at large. So what happens is that when they try and do a handoff one way or the other, there isn't enough coordination, and they can't seem to bridge that gap between the two groups. In one industry review by Becker, what you see here is the red reasons are reasons that have to do with people, and the gray reasons have to do more with technology. And what they highlighted was over half of the reasons that projects failed were either organizational structure or lack of communication or lack of coordination. It wasn't because they don't have the tools or the technology. If you ask the analysts themselves, they're telling us that about half the time, their time is wasted. And the reasons, again, the ones that are highlighted in blue, have to do with communication, lack of clarity of requirements, slow response in terms of requests for information, and also a lack of collaboration. So we're seeing that there is a problem. We're seeing that the projects don't succeed as often as we would like them to. And we're also seeing that a lot of those reasons have to do with communication. Now, I'll do another webinar soon, I think, about the differences between business leaders and data scientists. But you don't have to think very hard to understand why we aren't communicating well. Their personality profiles are almost 180 degrees opposite on the Myers-Briggs. Business leaders and data scientists have very different priorities, trying to streamline and systematize versus wanting to discover and explore all the possibilities. We're seeing differences in how they're trained and what they worry about and what their goals are. And we know that they speak very different languages. So in many ways, there isn't a surprise that we're having this much trouble. We just don't always acknowledge it. So I did a LinkedIn survey, and I think a couple of you responded to that. And first I asked the business leaders, when you interact with your data analytic team, how often do you get and understand the answers that you need? And how would you characterize your interactions? And what we see is that fewer than 1 in 10 think it's an awesome relationship. Only a third think it's good. Half say it's okay. And 1 out of 5 think it's frustrating and it's not working. Then the next week, I asked the analysts, describe what happens when you interact with the business team. What is that interaction like? Do they share context? Do they ask you for your expertise? And amazingly, it's almost a mirror image. Only fewer than 1 in 10 said it was awesome. A third said, yeah, it's pretty good. They asked me for input. And I would say I get enough context. Almost half said, look, they ask me something, they give me a little bit of background, but they don't ask me about how I would do it. And 1 in 5 say it's frustrating and no good. So when we have this kind of dysfunctional relationship, what is that costing us? Well, the first category you can think of is you're paying for very talented analysts and not necessarily using them in the most constructive way. So let's say the average salary is $100,000. They have benefits and training, tools that they need. So $150,000 that you are laying out as an organization for an analyst. Well, if there are 10 analysts, we'll just go with 10 as a round number. And the failure rate is 25%. Then it's $375,000 that you are spending on work that doesn't provide value. As you can see, a 50% failure rate, a 75% failure rate, and then that quoted number from the expert reviews, 85% failure rate, would be for every 10 analysts more than $1.2 million a year in wasted effort and time. So why don't we say, actually, there's a 50% failure rate, which was the average of what you guys reported. And then let's say half of that is due to communication problems. So we'll put a placeholder, $375,000 for this cost of miscommunication. So then what's next? Well, if you look at an analytic team and you realize that 2/3 of them feel that they are being given a request, but not being asked to use their skills and not being asked for their input, you can imagine what that feels like. So the second source of excess cost is frustration and being discouraged. The latest poll I saw that said that data analysts on average would be leaving their jobs within the next 2 years. So that means you're going to lose half this year, half next year. And the reasons were they were not engaged, they didn't feel like their skills were being used, and they had limited career progression opportunities. So if we look at what that turns into, increased turnover. So estimates on what turnover costs, you can decide how to apply that, but I've heard 6 to 9 months worth of salary, let's say. So let's say 75% of salary to replace that person, recruit, hire, onboard, and train. Second thing that happens when we are this discouraged and not engaged is productivity goes down. Employees who are not engaged have about 1/3 less productivity. That's some of the estimates. So let's use that estimate. So if we're talking about 10 analysts and we're replacing half of them each year, let's say that's $75,000 per analyst, and that the ones who are still working are not as productive as they could be, for a total of $540,000, which will be our placeholder now for category 2. So what other kinds of costs? Well, I just covered not getting the value from the investment you're making and the problem of having people leave. But let's think about the opportunity that we're missing. What if you had a data science group and business leadership who were completely in sync? Let's say they worked together so well that the analysts knew exactly what they were trying to accomplish and could help business leaders understand what's possible. That's something that we often overlook. So imagine that you could get an answer from the analysis that would make marketing way more effective. If you had 10 million in revenue, let's say a 3% improvement in marketing. So that's a 1 in 33 sales where the marketing added value, or 1 out of 20 sales, or 1 out of 10 sales. I've seen wonderful results from evaluations that had big effects on whether or not marketing was successful. So let's just say that we could be better at marketing 1 out of 20 opportunities. That amounts to $500,000. Let's say that you could improve the products because the data analysts understood how your current users were using the product. They understood how to position it differently, how to make it more effective, how to package it or price it. Again, 1 out of 30, 1 out of 20, 1 out of 10 times. If you're better at closing a sale or getting a new product that they would buy, let's say again, 1 out of 20 clients would buy that new product, another $500,000. Now, I said I would say 5 sources of cost for miscommunication, but I'll give you a bonus number 6, because I've seen great analysts, especially doing things like Six Sigma, being able to improve efficiencies to make them much more profitable. Now, I know that profitability is a little harder to quantify because so much goes into profits. So let's just say you could have a group that makes you 1% more efficient, and we'll put a placeholder at $100,000 and add that to our list. So here's where we end up. And feel free, if you are thinking about this, to, and Anita, let me know if there's a chat that we need to address. I did see that come up. So you can decide that I'm being overly aggressive or that I'm being conservative. But if I look at this set of hidden costs, we're looking at $2 million for every 10 analysts that we are either wasting their effort, losing them too soon, or not taking advantage of what it is that they're capable of doing. As you can imagine, you can also think about it as 20 analysts, 20 million in revenue. We're talking about $4 million. 50 analysts, $50 million in revenue. We're talking about $10 million that we are leaving on the table simply because we aren't able to communicate between the business function and the analytic function. And let me tell you, analytics is becoming more and more specialized and more advanced. And that is going to keep us in great need of being able to communicate better. I'm sorry I wasn't listening. Can you repeat everything you've said to me since you started working here? We are not good at making sure we hear everyone. So what now? I'm just going to offer a couple of suggestions on how to get us moving a little bit forward. First of all, we have to acknowledge that we have a problem. I am shocked when I talk to people and say, these two teams don't communicate very well. Oh, really? Well, yes. If you're in the trenches, you know it, but it is not a widely recognized issue that we don't communicate well. Second, we want to designate individuals who are responsible for making that relationship work. Either take current analysts and help them learn these skills, hire a person that can be the go-between who is trained to do those things, or take it on yourself and learn the skills so that we designate somebody who is responsible on both sides and acknowledge that both teams need to work with that person and really come together. And what we really need is people who speak both languages. McKinsey, I believe it was in 2019, coined a term analytics translator and said that there would be a need for 2 to 4 million analytic translators by the end of the decade. I am hoping to train hundreds or thousands of those people because I really believe this is a big issue for corporations. So the places that I recommend that people pay attention are what I call the handoffs. Because if we think about the business environment being in the top, dark blue, and the analytic environment being down there in the teal, the way that projects usually work is the business team has a request and they throw it over the fence in a figurative way to the analytic team. They take it on their side, create a design, do an analysis, package up the results, and then they throw it back over the fence to the business environment. And what we see here is that the business team believes that there is a problem on the right side. They believe that they aren't getting what they need. They don't give it to me in a way that I understand. I asked them X and they gave me Y. So from a business perspective, they think that the problem is on the final handoff. However, when you're thinking about the analysts, they think the problem is in the first handoff. What they are saying is, look, they dump a request with no context. Don't ask me what I think. Don't ask for my input on how the data work. And so they're over here in the frustrating part where that first handoff didn't work right. So we have to invest in helping people understand how to ask the right questions, how to explore what's really happening, and to build that synergy between the two teams. And there's also a handoff usually somewhere in the middle when things change as you're doing the analysis and you have to adjust. And we need attention at that handoff also. So these are the suggestions that I have. I will be doing a series of webinars talking about analytic translation because I think that is a new role that has gotten insufficient attention. And you can find a lot of information in my book, Become an Analytic Translator. And we also have launched a online course where we go through actual conversations between the business leader and the analyst. And we start to have a real dissection of how those conversations go wrong and how to do them more effectively. Another question, it's harder to get the attention of business than the analysts. And so what is my approach to getting either side? Well, what you're seeing today is one of my attempts to help the business understand what the potential is and what they're missing. So I spend time talking to businesses about how to make their analytic function more efficient and how to get the value out of it so that they aren't frustrated. When it comes to the analytic team, they are already frustrated, but they're not quite sure how to go about making things work more efficiently. So when I explain the types of tools that are available to them as an analytic translator and how they can probably unpack and engage with the business leaders in a more comprehensive way and a way that builds more collaboration, that's what makes them more interested in moving in this direction. And it's a specific type of person. If all you want to do is stay in the back room and analyze data, you may not want to be an analytic translator. But you do need some familiarity with what analysts do. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining. I really, really appreciate it. Think about how to structure that interface between analytics and business in the future. I thank you for joining us today and look forward to having you join us for the next round of webinars. Thank you.